Imagine this scene. The entire hall is silent, everyone waiting for the bride's yes, when suddenly, Emily Parker faces Ryan at the altar and bursts out, "I saw you cheating on me minutes before this ceremony." The scandal is immediate. Guests are shocked, cameras go wild, and in front of the world, Emily makes an impossible decision. "But I'm still getting married today, just not to you." All eyes turn to the back of the room. Emily extends her hand to the party's security guard. Ethan Reed hesitates for a moment, and to everyone's surprise, accepts. The billionaire heiress left her perfect fiancé for a stranger. The ballroom collapsed. But was it an act of courage or just the beginning of an even bigger trap? What would you do in Emily's shoes? Would you have the same courage? And is Ethan truly on her side, or is he hiding secrets that could destroy everything? But before this unusual story, subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with impactful stories that will surprise you. The big day had arrived. Emily Parker woke up and for the first time in years felt no fear of the future. At 26, heiress to a billion-dollar empire, she had grown accustomed to the pressure of the spotlight. The press called her America's modern princess, and that Saturday seemed like the culmination of that title. Her marriage to Ryan Miller, the man many saw as her perfect match. As the city buzzed with rumors about the most talked-about ceremony of the year, Emily stared at herself in the hotel room mirror. The long, luxurious white dress molded her figure. She sighed deeply and muttered to herself, "Today will be the first day of the rest of my life." That's what she wanted to believe, but deep down, a small, quiet voice kept whispering, "Really?" To the world, Ryan Miller was exemplary, a successful young executive, the son of a traditional family of investors, charismatic, elegant, always smiling by her side on magazine covers. Emily remembered how he had won her over with promises of stability, business partnerships, a perfect life. She wanted to believe she was giving her heart to the right man at the right time. Who wouldn't want to live a fairy tale? She repeated in her mind. But fairy tales always hide some secret. Hours before the ceremony, backstage at the luxurious mansion rented for the event, Emily faced a mishap. Her high-heeled heel got caught in the carpet during the final check of the room, and as she tried to free herself, she nearly fell. "Drugs!" she exclaimed, feeling her heart race. Suddenly, a firm hand grabbed her arm, preventing her from falling. "Careful, miss." His voice was deep, calm, and confident. Emily looked up and found a face she hadn't expected. It wasn't one of her family friends or anyone important. It was one of the security guards hired for the event, tall, with a firm posture, impeccable black uniform. He seemed the perfect blend of definition and mystery. "Thanks. I almost ruined everything before the party even started." The security guard gave a discreet half-smile. "It happens, but it seems you're already used to walking on fire lines." Emily laughed lightly, surprised by that statement. It wasn't common for someone to speak to her that way, without flattery. He didn't seem to care about her last name or her fortune. He simply saw her as a woman who could stumble and fall like any other. Before I could ask his name, he politely waved goodbye and returned to his position at the back of the room. But that meeting was marked. Who was he? Emily thought to herself, still processing the stranger's steady gaze. The next few hours passed at a frantic pace. Luxury cars drove through the gates, carrying businessmen, politicians, and celebrities. Journalists crowded behind the barriers, waving for the perfect photo of the bride. Emily struggled to maintain her composure, but her mind kept replaying the incident with the mysterious security guard. She couldn't explain why, but there was something about the way he held her arm, the tone of his voice that had penetrated her emotional defenses. Meanwhile, Ryan circulated among the guests, elegant in his tuxedo, flashing photogenic smiles. Shaking hands and laughing loudly, he looked like the modern prince everyone applauded. But Emily noticed something strange. He kept moving away, talking rapidly on his cell phone, and avoiding prolonged eye contact. He must be nervous, he thought, trying to shake off his uneasiness. Before walking down the aisle, Emily peeked through a small crack in the door that led to the foyer. The pianist was tuning the soft melody, hundreds of guests were murmuring eagerly, and the cameras were already in place. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered to herself, "Courage, Emily. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for. You have to be strong, smile, and believe you're on the right path." But deep down, a pang in my chest echoed, "What if it isn't?" Far away, leaning discreetly against one of the columns, the same security guard watched everything. His eyes were attentive but serene. Emily saw him for a second. Their eyes met, and unexplainably, she felt a brief comfort. Maybe it was imagination, maybe it was hope, but she felt as if, among hundreds of people, only this stranger had noticed her silent doubts. At that moment, she couldn't imagine it, but her destiny had changed forever. Because sometimes, the real fairy tale doesn't start with the perfect choice. It begins with a stumble, a mistake, a fall about to happen, and the right hand that arrives to prevent it. The hallway of the mansion, where the ceremony would take place, seemed a maze of sighs and hurried footsteps. Emily walked alone, her heart racing, trying to find a moment of silence before being called to the altar. With each step, her breath faltered. The dress weighed heavily, not because of the fabric, but because of the responsibility it carried. It was strange. Everyone was smiling, everyone was cheering, but she felt something wasn't right. The sparkle in Ryan's eyes over the past few months had lost its intensity. Maybe it was just a nervous bride thing, she thought. Maybe it was just the fear of taking such a big step. But fate has no mercy on doubts. Suddenly, as she turned the corner into the mansion's side garden, Emily stopped. Her eyes froze at the sight. There, hidden from view of the crowd, were Ryan and Chloe. Your Ryan and your best friend. They weren't just talking. It wasn't a supportive hug. It wasn't a nervous goodbye. It was a kiss. Slow, forbidden, too passionate to be a slip. The world collapsed into absolute silence. Emily grabbed one of the pillars to keep from falling. The ground seemed to spin, her hands trembling against the flawless white fabric that now seemed ridiculous to her. A princess dress, facing a crumbling fairy tale. Ryan backed away quickly when he heard the sound of Emily's heel hitting the floor. His eyes widened as if he'd been caught in the act. Chloe, pale, stood frozen, unable to say anything. "Emily," Ryan began, his voice shaking. "It's not what it seems." She took a step forward, her face burning, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's not what it looks like?" His voice was sharp. "I saw it, Ryan, with those eyes, both of you." Chloe tried to speak hesitantly. "Emily, please, it was a mistake, a moment of weakness." "A moment of weakness?" Emily laughed, a nervous, bitter laugh. "On my wedding day, in the aisle at my ceremony?" No one answered. The silence weighed like a sentence. Emily lifted her chin, even though her eyes were watering. Inside, she was broken. Outside, she built a wall. "You won't fall, not today," she told herself. "You won't give them the pleasure of seeing you destroyed." Without another word, she turned and walked back down the hallway, her head held high. Every step was a knife. Every movement of her dress felt like a cruel reminder of the farce her life was about to become. She heard Ryan calling her name and ran after him, but Emily quickened her pace. When she finally reached the door that led to the main hall, she stopped. She took a deep breath, quickly wiped away the tears that stained her makeup, and he murmured in a low voice, almost like a promise to his own invisible reflection in his mind, "I will not be humiliated." The next moment felt like a cursed theater. Outside, the music began. The guests rose, eagerly searching for the bride. The master of ceremonies smiled, announcing the grand entrance. And Emily walked in, beautiful, flawless, but broken inside. A whirlwind engulfed her, but no one noticed. The room sighed with enchantment. Ryan waited for her at the altar, trying to appear calm, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. Emily walked slowly, facing him. Each step was also a battle between stifling tears and maintaining her dignity. When she finally stood before him, she held the bouquet tightly. He tried to take her hand, but she discreetly pulled it away. The master of ceremonies began his speech, extolling love, unity, and a bright future. Beautiful words that sounded like poison to Emily. She no longer listened. She just saw the kiss, replaying in her mind like a cruel movie. Her heart was beating faster, each beat louder than the last, until she could do it no more. In front of everyone, Emily lowered her bouquet and stepped forward. Her voice echoed through the silent room. "No." Everyone froze. A murmur ran through the chairs. Ryan went pale. "What?" he stammered. Emily took a deep breath. The pain throbbed, but there was strength in her eyes. "I can't marry you, Ryan." His firm voice cut through the air. "You know why? Because just a few minutes ago, I saw who you really are. I saw you kissing my best friend." Shock gripped the audience. Some guests clapped their hands over their mouths. Others whispered loudly. Reporters hurriedly clicked their cameras, capturing the scandal. Ryan took a desperate step towards her. "Emily, please, let me explain." But she raised her hand, stopping him with dignity. "There is nothing more to explain." For a moment, the room fell into complete silence. Emily felt the weight of all the gazes, but she didn't lower her head. Her teary eyes shone with something new, courage. And then, with an unexpected calm, she said the words that would change everything. "I'm still getting married today, but not to you." The audience erupted in gasps and exclamations. Someone dropped a crystal glass. The scandal became uncontrollable. Ryan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Chloe didn't dare look up. Emily took a deep breath, maintaining her posture. Inside her, a flame burned. It was a mixture of pain and strength. "You will not be destroyed," she repeated silently. "You will be remembered." And amidst all those confused looks, her heart raced to a brief but powerful memory. The steady hand that had held her hours before, the calm voice that seemed to see beyond her mask. The security guard. Her eyes sought him out from the back of the room, among the black uniforms, discreetly lining the sides. And when she met his gaze again, she felt the same strange sensation, that only he saw who she really was, beyond the wealth and the spotlight. He watched her silently, tense but present. And it was then that Emily made the most unexpected decision of her life. "I'm getting married today, but not with you." A deathly silence descended upon the hall, and everyone waited, in disbelief, for the next sentence. For a moment, the world seemed to spin in slow motion. In the background, hidden among other security guards, stood Ethan. He watched everything attentively, but his steady, somber gaze betrayed something. He already knew this marriage wouldn't last. And suddenly, all the threads of fate intertwined there. Impulsively, Emily took a few steps toward him. Guests parted, perplexed, as if she were a mysterious parade. Ryan tried to follow her, but was immediately restrained by security guards, including Ethan's own colleagues, who were completely confused about what was about to happen. Emily stopped in front of him. Ethan maintained his firm, almost military posture, like a man prepared for any confrontation except this one. "You," she said, her voice choked but firm, "you're going to marry me." The air drained from the room. It was too unlikely, too bold, too unthinkable. But there was the billionaire heiress in front of hundreds of witnesses, choosing an unknown security guard over her cheating fiancé. Ethan took a while to respond. He blinked once, twice. He could have said no. He could have backed away. But then images flashed through his mind. The Millers, their arrogance, the rot that consumed that family. The goal he secretly harbored, to destroy the Millers' dirty legacy from within. Maybe this was the chance he never imagined. And what's more, he saw the dignity in Emily's eyes, a woman who was hurt but refused to be crushed. And deep down, I knew I couldn't leave her alone in this. "If that's what you want," he said finally, his deep voice echoing through the tumult, "then I accept." There was a second of deathly silence, and then chaos. "She's gone crazy," whispered one of the aunts. "The security guard?" repeated an incredulous businessman. "This will ruin our family," cried a distant relative. Emily, however, felt a strange calm. A kind of absurd certainty filled her chest. The master of ceremonies, confused, tried to protest, but Emily, with her authoritative presence, interrupted. "Go on, the groom has changed, that's all." The man swallowed hard. He dared not contradict her. And so, in front of cameras, stunned guests, and a humiliated ex-fiancé, Emily Parker placed the ring not on the finger of the perfect man, but on the finger of Ethan Reed, whose story no one there knew. He looked at their joined hands, then into her eyes. He tried to smile a little, as if he hadn't yet grasped what had just happened. Emily felt a wave of relief, strangely accompanied by hope. Ryan exploded, shouting in front of everyone. "This is a farce. He doesn't love you. He doesn't even know you. This man is an opportunist." Emily turned to him, facing him with a raised voice, filled with firmness. "You didn't love me either, Ryan. You never loved anyone but yourself." The sentence was like a public slap. Guests stood up, mouths open. The ceremony was brief and tense. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the master said, his voice low. And at that moment, the unlikely became official. The betrayed billionaire married the undercover security guard. Ethan discreetly slipped his arm around her waist to guide her, a natural, protective gesture. Emily accepted the touch like an anchor in the storm. As they crossed the aisle again, now husband and wife, the flashbulbs flashed frantically. It was the biggest social scandal in years. But for Emily, there was a powerful inner silence. Even in pain, she had kept her promise. "Today I was not humiliated. Today I turned the page in my life." She had no idea, however, how much more dangerous, more intense, and more real this new chapter would be than any story she had ever experienced. "Don't worry," he murmured close to her ear, low, just loud enough for her to hear. "You're safe now." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting those words sink in. For the first time that day, she believed them. But what she didn't know was, in his mind, a completely different phrase echoed. "This is the beginning of their downfall." The ballroom was in shambles. The ceremony was over, but no one knew how to react. Guests whispered in panic. Journalists frantically called their newsrooms. It seemed the entire mansion was swaying under the weight of an impossible secret. Emily walked with firm steps, though inside, she struggled to believe what she had just done. The train of her dress dragged along the red carpet, followed by incredulous stares. Beside her, Ethan stood erect, his arm discreetly resting against her as if shielding her from an invisible army. Across the room, Ryan struggled between security guards, his face red with rage and humiliation. "She's crazy," he shouted, his voice echoing through the space. "Don't you understand? He's only here for her money." But no one dared interrupt Emily. She kept her chin high, her eyes fixed on the future. Each step was a silent declaration. "I will not break down in front of you." When they finally reached the main hall, flashbulbs exploded in their faces. A crowd of photographers gathered outside the gates. Emily paused for a moment, feeling her breath quicken, and whispered to Ethan, "Everyone thinks I've gone crazy." He leaned in slightly, his blue eyes fixed on her. "Maybe, but they also think you had courage." A simple phrase, but it pierced her heart like a sweet blow. Courage. That was all she had left when everything else was gone. However, even she didn't know for sure how much of this marriage was courage and how much was desperation. Behind the scenes at the mansion, chaos was spreading. Family members argued. Advisors tried to save the Parker family's image. Some planned official press releases. Others murmured that Emily had destroyed years of social alliances in a single impulsive act. Among all the comments, however, one phrase kept coming up. Who is this man? Nobody knew Ethan Reed. He wasn't an heir, he wasn't a businessman. He was just a security guard in a black suit. To some, he was absurd. To others, he was the biggest romantic scandal of the decade. Emily, however, remembered the way he had held her hours before when she had nearly fallen. She remembered his steadiness, his calm amidst the chaos. And though it all seemed insane, part of her felt that step had been less of a mistake and more of an escape to freedom. In the car that took them away from the ceremony, Emily sat silently, staring at the street lit by the flashbulbs still blaring outside. Ethan stood beside her, motionless as a wall. "You didn't have to accept," she said, finally breaking the silence. "I could have just been a runaway bride." He took a moment to answer, looking out the window. Then he turned to her and said, "Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was just an opportunity." Emily's heart beat faster. Opportunity for what? Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained cool, but there was a hidden weight to it. "To keep you from being destroyed." He paused. "And maybe to destroy some other things too." She didn't know what to make of those words. She only knew that the man beside her was no ordinary man. There were secrets there, layers she couldn't yet decipher. For a moment, silence fell once more in the car. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to control the avalanche within her. She knew that the next day, the whole world would talk about her as the woman who left her perfect fiancé for a stranger. She would be called crazy, reckless, even ridiculous. But she also knew that she had achieved something rare. No one could call her weak anymore. "I chose not to be humiliated," she murmured to herself, almost like a mantra. Ethan looked at her without saying anything. He just kept that sentence in silence, like someone collecting pieces of a much larger puzzle. That night, they both knew nothing would ever be the same again. She believed she had performed a courageous act to save her dignity. He knew he had begun a dangerous game in which his true goal was finally approaching, destroying the Miller family from the inside out. Two worlds met at that altar, one for pain, the other for revenge, and the collision between these worlds was just beginning. The silence in the hotel room was almost deafening. Emily slowly removed the veil still clinging to her hair, letting it fall onto the armchair. The dress still shimmered in the yellow light, but to her, it looked like a battlesuit, no longer a symbol of love. Ethan was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with a neutrality that made her uneasy. He didn't seem the least bit uncomfortable being there, next to the woman who, in theory, was now his wife. Emily ran her hands over her face and broke the silence. "This is surreal." Her voice sounded choked. "This morning I woke up believing I'd be married to the man I loved. And now—" She tried to laugh, but the sound came out shaky. "Now I'm a stranger's wife." Ethan didn't look away. Strange, perhaps, but not entirely. She raised her eyebrows. "What do you mean by that?" He hesitated for a brief moment, as if measuring each word. "I just want to say that I've seen a lot in people, Emily. Enough to recognize someone who refuses to bow down to pain. Today, you showed that to the world." Emily stared at him silently. It was strange. Ryan had always praised her for what she had: beauty, money, influence. But Ethan spoke as if he saw something she herself was trying to hide. She looked away, walking to the window. The photographer's flashes still lit the street in front of the hotel. The scandal was just beginning. Tomorrow the news will be all over the papers. The billionaire heiress who married the security guard? They'll call me crazy. And they'll call you brave. His voice was calm, firm. You did what many people would never have done. You chose yourself. Emily ran her hand along the cold glass of the window and blurted out, "You seem to speak as if you know me, as if you already know who I am." He approached slowly, stopping a few feet away from her. "You showed me that today, and maybe I've known for a while." Her heart raced. There was a mystery in his words, a hidden weight she couldn't decipher. Something about Ethan Reed eluded any simple definition. He was a man with shadows, but also a strength that drew her closer. "Why did you accept?" Emily asked suddenly, turning to him, her eyes restless. "You could have said no. You could have run away from the mess I created, but you didn't hesitate. Why?" Ethan stared at her, and for a moment it seemed like he was going to confess everything. She saw the muscle in his jaw twitch, as if he were fighting his own truths, but then he chose a safe path. "Because I saw a woman about to be destroyed, and I couldn't allow it." Emily was silent, absorbing his words. Still, she sensed there was more, something he wasn't saying. The hours passed slowly. She removed her dress with the help of the bridesmaids who were still around the house, exchanging it for a simple white nightgown. When she returned to the bedroom, she found Ethan sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his black security uniform, as if he never wanted to relax. "You're not even going to take off that suit?" she joked, trying to break the tension, though there was truth to her teasing. He shrugged. "Old habits. I like to be ready for anything." Emily laughed with a sigh. "He looks more like a soldier than a groom." "Maybe I am." The silence returned, but this time it was different. There was something suspended in the air, a tension that wasn't just fear or anger. It was something new, a spark. Ethan stood, walked to his desk, and grabbed a bottle of water. He poured a glass and handed it to her. "Drink up. You need to stay on your feet. Tomorrow will be a battlefield out there." She accepted, her fingers brushing against his for a moment. A shiver ran down her skin. "You always talk about battles, about wars. Who are you really, Ethan?" He gave a half smile, but there was too much depth in his eyes for it to just be sympathy. "Who I am doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're not alone." Emily stared at him for a long moment, and in that moment, something inside her whispered that that was only half the truth. Ethan Reed wasn't there just to support her. He had other reasons, as deep and dark as the secrets surrounding the Miller family. But strangely, she wasn't afraid. For the first time all day, she felt like there was someone by her side who wouldn't let her fall. She slowly lay down on the bed, pulling the sheets up to her chest. She looked at him before closing her eyes. "Good evening, stranger." Ethan smirked, turning off the light. "Good evening, Mrs. Reed." The room fell silent, but inside Ethan's thoughts, the noise was deafening. The memory of Ryan's words, of the miller's arrogance, pulsed through his mind like a summons. This marriage wasn't just a scandal, it was the beginning of the end for them. And as Emily fell asleep believing she had found shelter, little did she know that she was, without realizing it, married to the man who held within him the key to the destruction of the Miller family. The next morning, Emily woke to the deafening sound of notifications on her phone. Hundreds of messages, missed calls, headlines blasting across every news portal. Her still heavy eyes slowly opened, and reality descended upon her like a storm. The wedding, the surreal choice, the scandal that had already spread throughout the world. Billionaire heiress trades prince for security. Wedding of the year ends in historic scandal. The mystery of Ethan Reed. Who is Emily Parker's new husband? Emily took a deep breath, wanting to shut everything out. She just wanted a few moments of silence. But she knew silence was dead. Now her life was a battlefield, and there was no turning back. Beside him, Ethan had been awake for a long time, sitting in the armchair with his arms crossed, as if he'd been keeping watch all night. He was impeccable, silent, with that constant look of alertness. "You don't sleep, do you?" Emily said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. He raised an eyebrow, only half a smile escaping. "Enough." Then he added, "Sleeping too much can mean waking up defeated." Emily snorted with tired irony. "Do you really talk like that all the time, as if we were at war?" He looked at her seriously. "Because we are. You just haven't noticed yet." Before she could respond, the room phone rang. The insistent ringing pierced her ears. Emily answered. Her heart already knew who was on the other end. It was Ryan. "Emily, for God's sake, we need to talk." His voice was laced with anger and desperation. "I won't let you destroy what we've built, tarnish my name like this. You're out of your mind, marrying a security guard? You threw it all away." Emily closed her eyes tightly, trying to control the tears of anger. "What I threw away was a lie. Everything you said to me, every look, every promise. You were kissing Chloe minutes before you walked down the aisle, Ryan. What more did I need to see?" On the other end, the charged silence betrayed that he had no excuses. But Ryan didn't back down. His tone hardened. "Listen, Emily, do you think you're done with me? No. You exposed me, you embarrassed me in front of everyone, and now I want you to know you're going to regret it. This man you chose, he's nothing. I'm going to show the whole world who he really is." Emily stopped, swallowing hard. She didn't know exactly why, but those words hit her hard. She felt Ethan's gaze on her, intense, as if he were listening to every syllable of that phone call. "The difference between us, Ryan," Emily replied firmly, "is that I don't need masks to exist, while you live hidden behind them." She hung up before hearing anything else. For a moment, just silence. Then Ethan spoke, without taking his eyes off her. "He won't stop." Emily turned to him nervously. "You think I don't know? Ryan always needs to win. He always needs to have the last word." Ethan stood, walking to the window. His movements were calculated, like someone planning their next steps. Great, because now he's just declared a war, and I was already ready for it. Emily frowned. "What do you mean by that, Ethan?" He didn't answer right away. He stood for a few seconds watching the flashes of the paparazzi still gathered outside, the crowd waiting for any gesture from them. Then he turned to her. "I'm just saying that Ryan and his family have a lot of secrets, and I won't rest until they all come to light." Emily felt goosebumps crawl across her skin. There was something about that intensity that frightened her, but also a sense of security. Ethan Reed wasn't just a man who had stumbled into her life. He carried an agenda, a past so powerful that it made her voice vibrate with conviction. But at the same time, there was tenderness hidden there. When his eyes met hers, Emily saw that beyond revenge, there was also humanity, perhaps even the beginnings of affection. "Be careful, Emily," he said, his tone lowering, almost like a private warning. "The battlefield has begun, and on it, you can't simply survive. You have to learn to attack." Emily took a deep breath. Deep in her heart, she knew Ryan would try to destroy her, not just with words, but with everything he had. But as she stared at Ethan standing before her, strong, unwavering, she felt something new. Perhaps for the first time in her entire life, she was not alone. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of headlines, debates on TV shows, and jokes on social media. Emily seemed to live in a perpetual state of public judgment, but behind the curtain of scandal, something even more dangerous was beginning to unfold. Her own family began to distrust this unexpected new husband. It was inevitable. The Parkers had always guarded their alliances, their every calculated step towards society. And now, seeing the heiress to the billion-dollar empire married to a simple security guard with no clear past was a threat they couldn't ignore. "He appeared out of nowhere," Emily's uncle said in a hurried meeting in the family's private office. "We don't know who he is, where he came from, what his interests are. This can't be a coincidence." Emily's mother, pale with nervousness, added, "Emily's every decision impacts the entire Parker family. We need to know exactly who she's sharing her life with." The family secretly hired private investigators to gather information about Ethan Reed, and soon the first clues arrived. A fatherless man, raised in poor neighborhoods. He worked for private security companies, accustomed to hostile environments, trained to deal with risky situations. So far, nothing extraordinary. But there was one detail that changed the tone of the investigation. Ethan had had contact with the Millers in the past. Between hidden reports and deleted documents, it was discovered that he had been a temporary employee at one of the Miller family's subsidiaries. And he hadn't left there by accident. He'd been fired under vague accusations related to an alleged breach of trust. But the story didn't seem to add up. "This is no coincidence," the uncle murmured, studying the papers. "This man has a connection to the Millers, and now he's at Emily's side." While all this was happening behind the scenes, Emily remained oblivious to the official investigation. However, she sensed in her heart that Ethan was hiding something. It was the way he spoke of the Millers, with pent-up resentment. It was the deadly serious look in his eyes whenever Ryan was mentioned. One silent night, she took advantage of the moment Ethan was preparing to leave the room and decided to confront him. "You already knew the Millers, didn't you?" His voice was firm, but filled with curiosity. He stopped in mid-movement. His tense shoulders betrayed him before he could even answer. He turned slowly, staring at her with that enigmatic gaze that seemed to open rifts in the air. "Where did that question come from?" he replied. Few words, but loaded. "I know when someone speaks with anger, Ethan. When you talk about Ryan, it's not just about the man who betrayed me. It goes deeper. It's personal." He didn't answer right away. He approached her, stepping slowly, closing the distance between them. Emily felt her heart race, but she didn't back away. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Yes, I've met them before. And the truth is, those who smile in front of the cameras are the same ones who bury their enemies in the dark." Emily shivered. "What does that mean?" Ethan looked away, as if holding back words he couldn't yet release. "It means the Millers did much more than just betray you, Emily. What they destroyed in my past will not be forgotten. And now, perhaps, fate has placed me exactly where I need to be." Emily's mouth fell open in surprise. Every bit of this confession only sparked more questions. The silence between them grew heavy, laden with half-truths. She realized there was much more to this unexpected union than courage or impulse. Ethan wasn't just the man who extended his hand to her at the altar. He was someone on a collision course with the enemies who were now part of her own story. And deep down, Emily knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be predictable again. Emily paced the room. I could no longer live with half answers. Ethan was there, ever present, ever protective. And yet, his every gesture carried the shadow of unspoken secrets. She stood before him, determined. Enough, Ethan. I married you in front of everyone. I risked my name, my entire life. Now I demand you tell me the truth. Why did you accept? Ethan sighed, as if each word were a weight he'd carried for years. Finally, he looked her in the eye. I wasn't at that party by accident, Emily. I was there for Ryan. The ground seemed to disappear. For Ryan, she repeated, her voice breaking. I was undercover, gathering evidence against him, against the Miller family. They're not just arrogant or corrupt. They ruined entire lives to protect their own image. I lost things I can't get back. All I could do was destroy everything they built on lies. Emily was speechless. Part of her felt betrayed. After all, he wasn't there just to save her. That choice had also been a piece in his game of revenge. But at the same time, her intuition told her Ethan wasn't lying now. Before she could react, the phone rang in the room. Emily answered. Ryan's voice cut through the silence with venom. So that's it? You thought marrying him would be safe? Emily, open your eyes. This man didn't just appear out of nowhere. He was there for me. Do you understand what that means? He used you. He used marriage to get closer. Emily felt the ground shake beneath her feet. She looked at Ethan, who stood there, not denying it, just staring. You want to destroy my family, Ryan continued, but in the end, you'll end up destroying her along with it. Emily hung up the phone, her hands shaking. Her heart felt like two worlds colliding inside her. On one side, her family's weakness and Ryan's betrayal. On the other, Ethan's naked truth, full of shadows. She took a deep breath and said to her husband, So tell me, Ethan, where does your revenge end, and where does the two of us begin? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just leaned closer to her, his gaze steady, filled with something that was both fury and tenderness. Maybe I'm figuring that out now. Emily wasn't sure if she should trust her, but she was certain of one thing. Ryan wouldn't lie to protect her, and Ethan hadn't been trying to deceive her when he revealed part of his mission. Her world, once again, had changed. And for the first time, she understood something bigger. That impulsive marriage wasn't just a scandal. It was the beginning of a silent war. And she was in the center of it. Emily stared at her reflection in the mirror, as if staring at a stranger. The woman staring back at her wasn't the same naive woman who'd woken up days ago, dreaming of a perfect wedding. Now she saw a tired, yet hardened face. She saw eyes that carried pain, yes, but also a new strength, forged in humiliation and the fire of truth. Still, a question throbbed inside her, uncontrollable. Can I trust Ethan? He was always there, close by, observing every detail as if he could predict the Millers' next move. Sometimes Emily felt safe. Sometimes she felt scared. He didn't pretend to be a prince, like Ryan, but he didn't tell the whole truth either. That night, Emily found him in the hotel's makeshift office. Folders, documents, and newspaper clippings were scattered across the desk. a web of secrets he'd clearly been gathering for a long time. "You really planned it all, didn't you?" he asked, his voice thick with accusation and curiosity. "Break into the party, infiltrate it, destroy the Millers?" Ethan looked up, his eyes cold and direct. "I planned to end them, not marry you. That was fate." Emily laughed humorlessly. Fate or convenience? He moved closer, so close that Emily felt the heat of his breath. "You can think whatever you want, but look into my eyes and tell me, since the altar, since that moment, do you feel like I used you, or that I protected you?" Emily hesitated. Silence was her only response, but her heart was pounding too loudly. Ethan noticed. "I don't promise perfection," he said gravely, "but I promise to fight anyone who tries to break you again." There was truth in that voice. There was something so raw it made her tremble. But along with the truth came a warning. Ethan wasn't just fighting for her. There was a war of his own going on beneath the surface of this story. And Emily? She was in the middle. The next morning, revenge took new forms. A fake news story appeared in the newspapers. Ethan Reed, Emily Parker's surprise husband, has a criminal record. Doctored photos and planted stories quickly went viral. It was Ryan striking back with dirty weapons. Emily read every line of those articles and felt her stomach churn. I didn't know what to believe. I couldn't tell the difference between what was real and what was manipulated. Confronted Ethan again. "They're saying you've been arrested, that you're violent, that everything about you is a lie." He stood his ground, approached her, and lightly touched her hand. "They'll invent anything to separate us, Emily. And they'll start by putting doubts in your head. The question is, will you believe them, or will you believe what you've experienced with me so far?" The words weighed heavily. Emily looked at him and for the first time felt there was no simple answer. Between truth and lies, between pain and protection, between love and trap, her heart was divided. And worst of all, both paths could destroy her. The hotel ballroom was packed. Reporters, cameras, and voices were all jostling for the headline of the century. Ryan Miller had called a press conference, his last gambit to regain control of the narrative. Emily Parker was there, sitting in the front row, with Ethan beside her. The scandal was no longer just about betrayal or impulsive marriage. It was about power. Who would win? The Parker empire allied with an enigmatic stranger, or the Millers trying to save their honor? Ryan took the stage with his usual practiced confidence. His eyes, however, shone with resentment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, smiling bitterly, "you all know what a circus Emily Parker turned my marriage into. She humiliated me, exposed our family, and, to make matters worse, married a man with a questionable past." The flashbulbs went off. The audience murmured. Emily clenched her fists but remained erect. "Ethan Reed isn't who he seems," Ryan continued, his tone rising. "He's been infiltrating my family, spying, planting false information. He's a fraud, an opportunist who used Emily as a front for his revenge." The room erupted in questions. Emily turned to Ethan, her heart aflame. He, surprisingly, showed no fear. He only expected it. He stood up slowly, walked to the stage, and took the microphone. His gaze pierced Ryan like a blade. "You're right about one thing, Ryan. I went undercover, but not to plant lies, to reveal your truths." The screens in the room lit up. Projected images showed documents, secret accounts, evidence of money laundering and forged contracts bearing the Millers' names. Each screen was an open wound. The uproar was immediate. Journalists shouted, cameras shook. Ryan stammered, trying to deny it, but the evidence spoke for itself. Ethan faced the audience and declared, "The real farce was never me. It was always him. It was always the Millers." Emily felt her heart race. In that moment, everything made sense. Ethan's hard gaze, his words about battles, his constant presence. He did indeed have a goal. He wanted justice, and along the way, he had become her unexpected protector. Ryan was restrained by security guards as he tried to stop the performance. His desperate screams echoed, but they sounded more like the fall of an empire than the words of an innocent man. Emily stood up and walked to the stage. The packed hall fell silent as she took the microphone. Everyone called me crazy, impulsive, and maybe I am, but I'd rather be crazy than live chained to a lie. Ryan betrayed me not only as a fiancé, but as a human being. And today you saw with your own eyes what he really is. I don't regret marrying Ethan Reed. I didn't choose him for his money, his power, or his image. I chose him because at the moment of my greatest downfall, he was the one who lifted me up. The audience erupted in applause, screams, and relentless flashbulbs. For many, it was the most unexpected scene of the decade. And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like a victim. She felt free. When the press conference ended, Ethan followed her out. In the empty hallway, her breath still heavy, she looked at him and asked, almost in a whisper, "And now, what are we two?" He held her hand tightly, his eyes softer than ever. "Now, we are what we choose to be." Emily smiled, a lump in her throat. "Then I choose you." Ethan didn't respond with words. He simply pulled her close, in a silent embrace, but one filled with the promise that despite all the chaos, they would no longer be loose pieces on a revenge board. They would be something new, something untamable. Outside, the world was still ablaze with scandals and headlines, but amidst them, there was only one truth. On the altar of shame, Emily had found courage, and in the embrace of a stranger, she had discovered the beginning of her true life. Emily Parker began this day believing she was living a fairy tale, but ended up writing a much more powerful destiny. In a single movement, she transformed humiliation into courage, betrayal into freedom, scandal into rebirth. The world called it madness, but she knew it was strength. The world called it recklessness, but deep down it was a choice. And it was that choice that led her to Ethan Reed, the man who entered as a stranger but remained an ally, a protector, and perhaps, who knows, the true love she never imagined. At the altar of shame, Emily discovered that sometimes you have to lose everything to finally find yourself. True power lies not in preserving appearances, but in creating one's own truth. And that was just the first battle, because when you challenge giants, the war never ends in the first act. Did you enjoy this journey full of emotion, twists, and unexpected courage? So don't forget to follow the channel to follow the next stories, new, intense, and with surprising endings. Here, every fall can become a rebirth, and every betrayal, the beginning of a greater destiny.